Hallo? Ja, die handhelds die komen daar ook uit.
Please take a seat. Good afternoon and welcome to Europol's headquarters in The Hague. We are honored to host our distinguished guests today, including our speakers on stage, the Europol Management Board, representatives from law enforcement agencies and justice and home affairs agencies, academia, international media, and those that are following us today via the live stream. We are welcoming you to the press conference marking the launch of Europol's Serious and Organized Crime Threat Assessment 2025, titled The Changing DNA of Serious and Organized Crime. This report is more than just a report. It's a major undertaking that provides policymakers, member states' law enforcement agencies, and other stakeholders with structured, data-driven analysis and intelligence of organized crime, trends and their impact within the EU and beyond. Published every 4 years, the report serves as the foundation for Europe's strategic approach to tackling serious and organized crime. And based on its finding, the Council of the European Union will set priorities for law enforcement action for the next 4 years. Joining me on stage today are our speakers who will address you in the following order. Our host, Ms. Catherine de Bolle, Executive Director of Europol. Next to her, Mr. Magnus Brunner, European Commissioner for Internal Affairs and Migration. And then on behalf of the Polish Presidency of the Council of the European Union, Mr. Maciej Duszczyk, Undersecretary of State at the Ministry of the Interior and Administration of Poland, and Mr. Marek Boron, Commander-in-Chief of the Polish Police. Commander Boron will speak in Polish. A translation into English is available. Questions from the media will be taken after the 4 statements of the principals. And if time allows, we will also allow questions coming in via the live stream. But for now, please join me in welcoming our first speaker and host, Catherine de Bolle, Executive Director of Europol.
Good afternoon, dear Commissioner, dear Minister, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to address you today on a matter that is reshaping the very foundations of the EU internal security. The evolving nature of serious and organized crime, what I would call the changing DNA of organized crime. Organized crime is not decreasing. There is no sound. It's okay? Everything working? Okay. Or, as I said, organized crime is not decreasing, it is increasing. It moves through the digital highways, infiltrates our economies and institutions. It adapts faster than we have seen before. And this is not just a law enforcement challenge. In fact, it's a challenge and a direct threat to our economy, our societies, and our future. The 2025 EU Serious and Organized Crime Threat Assessment, the so-called EU-SOCTA, offers the most comprehensive intelligence on this threat. This report, ladies and gentlemen, is a wake-up call. Organized crime is growing, evolving, and becoming more dangerous. Our response must be as dynamic. Serious and organized crime is not only pervasive, it is also undergoing a fundamental transformation. Its own DNA is changing. First, crime is becoming more destabilizing. It corrodes the political, economic, and social structures that hold our societies together. It generates illicit money that fuels violence and extends corruption. But organized crime is no longer just about making money. We observe a growing collaboration between criminal networks and actors orchestrating hybrid threats, exploiting geopolitical tensions and undermining our institutions. We see that the line between profit-driven crime and politically motivated activities is becoming increasingly blurred. This is how organized crime and hybrid threats now operate, chipping away at our stability, eroding trust in our institution, and fueling insecurity. In fact, there is a dual destabilizing effect, a more structural one, originating from money laundering, violence, and corruption, and the second, more recent trend of collusion between organized crime and hybrid threats. Second, crime is increasingly nurtured online. The internet is not just a tool for criminals, it is now the primary theater of operations. The digital environment is not just where criminal activities like cyber attacks or online fraud takes place, it has become an enabler, a countermeasure, and a target for organized crime. An enabler because criminals, they exploit digital infrastructure for recruitment, trade, money laundering, financial transactions, and deception. It is a countermeasure because the biggest change we observe is the exploitation of the digital infrastructure to shield criminal activities from law enforcement. And this happens in two ways. The first one, platforms and solutions that are specifically designed by criminals for criminals. We saw that in the cases like EncroChat, SkyOCC, or more recently with Ghosts. And the second, through the abuse of mainstream tools, such as end-to-end encrypted communication services, which are designed to protect the privacy of citizens. These state-of-the-art applications provide legitimate encryption, but criminals use it to hide and to blend in with ordinary users. And the digital environment is also a target for organized crime, which steals, trades, and exploits data and digital assets. Indeed, data is power, both in the legitimate world and in the criminal underworld. And this brings me to the third and possibly most alarming reason why the DNA of organized crime is changing. Crime is accelerated by AI and emerging technologies. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, and quantum computing are creating new opportunities for criminals to operate with speed, precision, and anonymity. And the transformation of organized crime also extends to its tactics. Let me highlight how three traditional tactics used by organized crime are changing. Money laundering has always been the backbone of organized crime, but we are now moving into a new era for money laundering. Emerging technologies allow money laundering at scale. Cryptocurrencies, digital finances, and decentralized platforms help criminals to increasingly hide illegal transactions and conceal their identities. Corruption tactics are also changing through technology. Criminals target, in particular, those individuals who have access to corporate digital infrastructures. And we see the worrying trend of young people being exploited by organized crime, in particular to commit violence. Recruitment of young people takes place on social media and messaging apps, taking advantage of the anonymity and the encryption they offer and using communication strategies to speak to young people. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a race between those who exploit technology for crime, making it faster, more sophisticated, and harder to detect, and those who use technology to fight back. And we must ensure that law enforcement stays ahead. The changes are not happening in isolation. They are fueling entire industries of crime, and let me briefly describe how the blueprint of criminal landscape is shifting. Cybercrime is evolving into a digital arms race, targeting governments, businesses, and individuals. AI-driven attacks are becoming more precise and devastating. Some attacks show a combination of motives of profit and destabilization, as they are increasingly state-aligned and ideologically motivated. Online fraud is reaching epidemic levels, powered by data leaks, artificial intelligence, and social engineering. Child exploitation has taken a dark turn. The accessibility of AI tools has transformed child sexual exploitation. Synthetic AI material multiplies the volume of abuse material online, creating additional challenges in the identification for victims and offenders. Migrant smuggling has become more sophisticated, with traffickers adapting quickly and leveraging online platforms for advertising, recruitment, and financial transactions. We also observe how migrant smuggling is instrumentalized by certain actors behind hybrid threats. Drug trafficking continues to be one of the most serious threats to EU society. It has a real capacity to destabilize the EU through violence, corruption, and infiltration, as we have seen in other places. Firearms is a key enabler of organized crime, shaped by technological advancements, online marketplaces, and the availability of weapons from conflict zones in Europe's neighborhood and beyond. This might become a bigger issue in the aftermath of the war. Waste crime is a silent but devastating issue. Criminal networks infiltrate the legitimate waste economy, profiting from illegal disposal and hazardous waste trafficking while polluting the environment. These are the key threats, those growing and expanding at a faster pace, but they are just a few of all the threats we are confronted with. Criminal networks, they adapt to geopolitical changes, economic instability, and technological advancements. We have seen in Europe how wars influence the dynamics of organized crime. The post-war also brings new challenges. As global crises evolve, so too will the threats we face. Therefore, if organized crime is adapting, we also have to adapt. We need to keep the edge on organized crime. The response must be intelligence-led, technology-driven, and relentlessly collaborative. Europol is at the heart of this effort, providing intelligence, expertise, and operational support to the member states. Through the EU-SOCTA, we deliver vital insights that guide law enforcement in prioritizing threats and refining strategies. Our proactive and targeted approach ensures that we remain ahead of criminal enterprises, anticipating future threats before they manifest. But law enforcement alone cannot win this fight. We must strengthen international cooperation and intelligence sharing to disrupt cross-border crime. Leverage emerging technologies to counter AI-driven and cyber-enabled crime. Forge stronger public-private partnerships to mitigate vulnerabilities exploited by criminals. Invest in the capabilities of law enforcement to keep pace with technological advancement, and foster resilience within our societies by equipping citizens and businesses with the knowledge to safeguard against crime. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of European security is in our hands. The threats we face are evolving, but so are we. Through collaboration, innovation, and decisive action, we can turn the tide. This is a fight for the rule of law, for our communities, for our businesses, and for the future of our children. And we will not let organized crime dictate the rules of the game. The EU-SOCTA 2025 is a roadmap. Let's act on it. Thank you.
Thank you much, Executive Director Katrien de Bolle, for your insights into the D, the N, and the A of organized crime and the threats and the tactics we are seeing. By now, the report will be online, so if you think it's a good investment to read those 100 pages, you will find it on Europol's website. I'm now very much looking forward to our next statement. Please join me in welcoming European Commissioner for Internal Affairs and Migration, Mr. Magnus Brunner.
Thank you very much, dear Executive Director Katrien. Thanks very much for inviting us here to Den Haag, Minister, Commander-in-Chief, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to stress what you said concerning the wake-up call. I think we probably need a wake-up call every day, almost, on that topic. But we had a wake-up call actually 10 years ago. That was well, this wasn't the first wake-up call, but it was a real sort of decisive wake-up call, I would say. Actually, exactly today, 10 years ago, 4 gang members burst into a crowded pub in Gothenburg, armed with rifles, with assault rifles, and they fired indiscriminately and injuring 8 people, killing 2 people. One victim was actually their intended target, and the other one was an innocent bystander. The other one was called Petar Petrovic, just to remember that. I didn't know that a couple of days ago. I didn't know his name, but I mean, that shows us how close that all is. And he was a Swedish citizen, originally Serbian, 20 years old. A very young man. And a few months later, we had another organized crime attack in Gothenburg, a car bombing that claimed even more innocent lives. This time, I think 3 children at the end of the day. So together, these events shocked Sweden on the one hand, but it shocked, of course, the entire European Union. And it was a wake-up call. It opened our eyes to how actually crime touches the lives of ordinary EU citizens. And we feel that, of course, not every day, fortunately, but unfortunately, in a timely manner. And what followed after that was actually a series of steps also at the European Union level to tackle organized crime, of course, notably by strengthening Europol, for instance. And these steps were informed by the threat assessments and recommendations of the 2017 and then 2021 SOCTA reports. But even as our security response, of course, has improved, and you were talking about that, Katrien, that we, of course, have to keep up with the criminals, and it has improved, of course. The nature of threats we face continues, of course, to evolve and also to increase in complexity. Less than a year after the 2021 SOCTA, we realized, and actually when SOCTA was published at that time, Russia invaded Ukraine, and a lot of member states of the European Union, of course, suffer, having Poland on this table, of course. And that actually, this invasion also destabilized the whole region in a way. I'm sure Minister is talking about that later as well, and created a sort of, well, not a sort of, but a hybrid warfare also towards Europe. And of course, Poland especially has the experiences, the bad experiences in that. And it has led to something new. It has led to the blurring of the lines between the internal dimension and the external dimension. That is always, I think, something we have to look into. And criminal networks that work on behalf, actually, of foreign powers, of foreign governments also. That's something new, I would say, in Europe. That hire migrant smugglers also to weaponize the migration against the European Union. They used to have energy as a weapon against the European Union. Now it's even more than that. It's not only energy, but it's people, and that of course worries us a lot. And at the same time, also the rapid advance of new technologies. You were mentioning that as well, Catherine, and also the emergence of a I would say a truly multipolar world order are creating new challenges also for the law enforcement. As the new EU-SOCTA puts it, and as you mentioned it, the DNA of serious and organized crime is actually changing also in our world. And referring to this Gothenburg pub shootings that has happened in 2015, events like that were still considered actually rare in many member states, in many parts of the European Union, but since then they've become more and more frequent within the European Union. Only a few weeks ago, we actually less than a few kilometers, or less than 1 kilometer away from my office, from the Parlement in Brussels, armed gangs started shooting on the streets with rifles. And it's not the first time this has happened in Brussels in recent months, actually. And we see that, of course, throughout the European Union. And it's actually the unfortunate reality we are facing in many other European cities as well. And EU citizens can feel the change that is actually taking place. They feel maybe less secure in every part of their lives. They worry about walking on the streets during nights. So we really have to tackle that. And I think the people in the European Union, of course, they're looking at us to act, and they are, of course, right to do so. We have to do something all together. The presidency, the Europol, of course, and as a commission, and as a parliament, and as a council, all together. So what is the response? What is our response as a commission? I think our response has to be comprehensive. It has to be resolute also. And this is why we are presenting the new internal security strategy. We are working on that, and that will represent a change, I would say, in our whole approach towards the topic. Going forward, we will no longer see our internal security as an isolated policy area focused only on cooperation between the national authorities of the member states, which is, of course, very important. Of course, coordination inside the European Union will remain a very important part of our work. But beyond this, we must embed security into everything we do, into all different files, into all different portfolios. And this international cooperation is also, as you mentioned, very important. Some threats enter our union in less than a second, as an encrypted message, for instance, ordering an assassination of a rival drug dealer. Some threats enter in a few days, like a bus full of migrants paid by the Russians, by the Russian authorities, driven by a smuggler, by the way. And some threats enter in a few weeks, like a shipment of cocaine, for instance, hidden inside a container, be it from Latin America or wherever. But these threats all have one thing actually in common, the international dimension, as I mentioned before, and we see this more and more, which is why under this new internal security strategy, our goal is to forge new partnerships of security. We just did that with Brazil about 2 weeks ago, had an agreement with Brazil on security. Also strengthening ties to existing global partners when it comes to Latin America, for instance, our cooperations there, or the United Kingdom outside the European Union. Also, as a third example, to put security on the center of the agenda when it comes to trade talks, when it comes to visa facilitation, or when it comes to other parts and to other agreements with a third country. And also to align our internal security strategy with our defense strategy. There will be a white paper on defense, but also on the preparedness strategy. So that has to be and has to go hand in hand, in my opinion, and not see it as a singular strategy. And we really try hard to coordinate that within the Commission as well. When it comes to Europol and strengthening Europol, that is, of course, also very important. We cannot expect to succeed in all this without the required resources. That's for sure. That is another big change in our approach also when it comes to the internal security strategy. We are making sure the resources will be there to fully implement our strategy, of course, and Europol plays a very important part in that. So Europol, you said it's in the heart, it's at the heart of security altogether. It is, of course, a very central element of our European security architecture, of course, as we take the fight against serious and organized crime to the next level. You, especially, Catherine, you are, as Europol, ideally, I would say, positioned to support the member states by coordinating, also by reinforcing the European Union's law enforcement efforts offline, but also online. And the online, of course, gets more and more important as well. And to this end, we are working to secure a significant increase in the resources and also in the capacity altogether of Europol, with the goal of doubling your staff. If it's too much, you just tell me. Yep.
That's okay.
Over the next years, at least. Okay. I'm happy that you are happy. So I'm happy if you are happy. Okay. And I think it's not the only part, of course. No. Doubling is enough, I would say, for the first step. No, but being serious again, I think the capacity improvement with Europol, of course, is important, but also when it comes to Frontex, for instance, that is also, and other agencies as well. So coming back to SOCTA, maybe, because we're talking about that today, even with, I would say, even with the best strategies we have and all the resources we're just talking about, all the best resources in the world we will have, especially when it comes to Europol, we will only see results if our efforts are on a strategic level, when it's coordinated, I think, and when it's well targeted, and using the money as efficiently and effective as possible is always very important, and not just because I used to be a former finance minister, but that is always important on a national and, of course, also on a European level. We need, I think, to understand also our priorities in that, to know where to invest with limited resources, of course, which is pretty obvious. And that is why this year's EU-SOCTA is coming actually precisely at the right moment also. This fourth edition is, I would say, the most comprehensive one. And I haven't read through all the 100 pages you mentioned yet, but at least the main parts, but we'll do that on our way back to Brussels, of course. But no, we of course know and talked about the what is in it, and you mentioned the main priorities already. It is, I think, very rich in detail, covering the online dimension, which I mentioned before, which is, I think, very, very important, money laundering, shadow financing, child exploitation, for instance, so the most important topics, of course. And I think this 2025 SOCTA, like our strategy also, like our internal security strategy, is also forward-looking, and that is very important to tackle the challenges that are ahead of us. It covers also new and emerging threats, vectors like the use of artificial intelligence, which is also important. The quick and often big changes in our security environment need to be mirrored in the way we anticipate all these threats, and also the way we respond to these threats. And therefore, thank you very much, Katrin, and to all your staff, of course, at Europol for the work you have done on the EU-SOCTA, and as always in cooperation, of course, with the member states. That is important, and that's sort of at the heart of Europol also, and it's a very good example on about how Europe can work together with the institutions and the member states. They are partners, the member states are partners of the European institutions, and that is actually vital in building up the future on security. And I can assure you, my staff, the DG, of course, also is very eager to work together to get the copies also, and we will begin the task of reflecting its content also in our work. We did that already when it comes to security strategy, of course, but also other files right away, and maybe most importantly, we will support its translation also in the operational priorities altogether. So, of course, for a strategy to mean something, actually, it must also have a goal, and that takes me back to what I was mentioning in the beginning, to the attack in Gothenburg 10 years ago today. This guy, Petrovic, decided to go to a local pub, have a drink there, watch Barcelona against Manchester City playing in the Champions League match, and if he were still alive, just think about what he could do now. He would maybe have completed his studies, I don't know, maybe he had created a family, starting a family of his own, and that is the ultimate goal of our strategy, also of our internal security strategy, and everything actually we do together to enhance the security of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, European Commissioner Markus Brunner for Internal Affairs and Migration. Thank you for your insight into the upcoming security strategy, which, if I'm not mistaken, will be still out this month in March. And I can assure you the 100 pages are a quick read. There's a lot of crime in it, so it's very suspenseful. We are moving to our next speaker, speaking on behalf of the Polish Presidency of the Council of the European Union. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Maciej Duszczyk, Undersecretary of State at the Ministry of the Interior and Administration of Poland. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear Madam Director, the Commissioner, the General Boroń. Of course, thank you very much for inviting me for this very important event to launch the Europol's key document, SOCTA, report SOCTA. But let me also start to say a few words about the wake-up call. Because when we started to discuss about the presidency just after the changing of the government in January last year, we started to discuss about the motto for our presidency, and of course it was a lot of different ideas how we can send the message to the European Union via the motto. But we discussed a lot. But in the end of the day, we proposed this Security Europe, and I think so. It was absolutely fantastic idea, excellent idea to have this motto as the Security Europe. But of course, we see this security not only via the internal or external security. We decided to propose a much comprehensive approach, Namely, during our presidency, we discussed also such security as the food security, energy security, cyber security, because in our common world, in our today's world, the security is really comprehensive. We have to see on the different aspects of security. But of course, if we speak about the food security, energy security, it is not obvious for all our citizens. But if we speak about the internal security, it is obvious for all of us. That's why I think so. Then thank you very much again for inviting us to this, to launching this SOCTA report, because this is absolutely crucial, and the Polish presidency in the European Union has been awaiting this document. It is, of course, important source of information for European law enforcement agencies on the development of serious and organized crime, major trends and threats. It is the main base for the activities of the presidency and the EU as a whole in the area of fighting organized crime. The new impact cycles for 2026-2029 will be based on this report, I'm quite sure. But of course, not only Europe, but in fact the whole world is facing challenges that we have not seen so far. That's why I think so this title of this report is very important. The changing DNA of serious and organized crime. I think so this is brilliant title of this report. New threats have been added to those we are familiar with, such as cyber threats, the darknet, the financing of crime through cryptocurrencies, or as in the case of Poland, the use of migrants as weapons by dictators in Belarus and Russia. We must therefore keep up with crime so as not to give it a buffer. At the same time, no country will be able to face these new challenges alone. We must act absolutely together. Europol is the best example of this. Common investigation, sharing information, and data will increase the effectiveness of our actions. For this, however, trust between us is absolutely essential. Crucial to the success of our efforts is a good diagnosis of the situation. To be honest, for me as the university professor, this is absolutely obvious. After all, we cannot waste our potential by taking action that has not been properly identified and described. This is why the SOCTA report is so important, because we have to concentrate, to focus on the real threats. Because this is limited sources, of course, we have, this is absolutely necessary to concentrate, to focus on the most important threats. I assume that SOCTA will be extremely helpful in finalizing the internal security strategy. Magnus has already mentioned this document that is expected to be published in the upcoming weeks. Having in mind the discussion at the informal Justice and Home Affairs Council in January in Warsaw, it is clear that the member states expect solutions that will help us face current threats. Poland, as the presidency, but also as a member state with the EU external border, has high expectations towards this strategy. I will very briefly address the priorities of the Polish presidency of the EU in security. Our main goal is to monitor and neutralize threats to internal security that are linked to Russian aggression in Ukraine and to comprehensively manage the influx of war refugees in connection with the war. In the area of combating organized cross-border crime, we are paying particular attention to drug smuggling, human trafficking, infiltration of criminal groups, hybrid threats in the context of their impact on internal security, as well as monitoring the smuggling of weapons and ammunition from Ukraine. And I really appreciated that in this report also this issue is highlighted. That's of course, we hope that the just peace will be reached in the relatively short period of time, but we have to also take into account the consequence of the peace, but also we have to be prepared for different challenges we will face after the, I hope, just peace in Ukraine. We are also continuing activities related to the implementation of the EU roadmap for combating drug trafficking and organized crime, in particular developing the European Port Alliance and strengthening the resilience of logistic hubs against infiltration by criminal circles. And I'm really happy that in the next months we will organize the senior official meeting, European Ports Alliance in Gdańsk, under, of course, our presidency in the European Union. Regarding the development of Europol, the unprecedented situation in the area of internal security creates new challenges for international law enforcement cooperation. This is the reason for the continuous expansion of Europol's competences and its mandate. As for the impact mechanism, we realize that we are at the very important moment in the process of designing the new cycle. The activities of the Polish presidency will focus on the development of Council conclusions on EU crime priorities for impact based on the new SOCTA 2025 report. We are planning to approve this document at the Justice and Home Affairs Council in June. In the context of recent evaluation of impact results, we are aware of the need for changes that would address gaps and weaknesses in the mechanism, increase its efficiency, ensure financial stability, and optimize the way the mechanism operates. Therefore, since the beginning of our presidency, we have also been leading a debate on the future of impact and possible directions for its future development. This thread will be continued during the upcoming COSI committee meeting in March and May. We place special emphasis on countering irregular migration, including its instrumentalization, strengthening the protection of the US external borders, improving the effectiveness and sustainability of returns, and hence enhancing cooperation with countries along the main migration routes. In this context, I would like to thank Magnus, especially for you, for this effort, for your effort in publishing a draft of the new return policy for migrants a few days ago. I can promise that as the presidency, we will do everything to ensure that a discussion on this subject take place as soon as possible. We will certainly also be making constructive proposals on how to make voluntary and forced return even more effective, with a special focus on people who have committed crimes in the EU. In the area of combating migrant smuggling, we are continuing work on an amendment to the Europol regulation, strengthening the agency's competence in this area, in particular developing the capacity of the European Migrant Smuggling Center, which I will have the opportunity to visit today. A negotiating mandate has been developed by the Council within the frames of the law enforcement working party work, and we are currently awaiting the start of the trilogue stage. The Polish presidency also initiated the discussion on the current modus operandi of migrant smugglers, taking into account the digital context. It is essential to identify existing gaps in order to dismantle the criminal networks and to develop effective solutions for our law enforcement agencies. On the issue of arms and ammunition smuggling, we held a debate during the recent COSI committee meeting to discuss countermeasures that the EU can undertake to prepare for the increased arms smuggling, unfortunately, that may happen in the aftermath of the hostility in Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and Catherine, thank you once again for publishing this report. I wish you good discussion, deliberations, and as little work as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the Polish perspective under the presidency of the Council, Mr. Maciej Duszczyk, Undersecretary of State at the Ministry of the Interior of Poland. For our last speaker, please put on the headsets for English to Polish translation. And I would very warmly welcome Mr. Marek Boron, Commander-in-Chief of the Polish Police. And afterwards, we can have our Q&A session. Thank you much. Mr. Boron, the floor is yours.
Szanowna Pani Dyrektor Wykonawcza Europolu,
Executive Director of Europol, Commissioner, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you at such an important venue. Europol was established to strengthen international cooperation in the fight against organised crime. This meeting is also particularly important to me personally, leading the Polish police force during the Polish presidency of the EU. It's an honour. But it's also a great challenge and responsibility for taking decisions that will affect the lives of millions of people in our continent. It's about their very safety. When we think about the EU's internal security, we have to think about the leading role that Europol plays here. Europol, here in The Hague, is where international police cooperation comes together, and the actions taken by the member states at the national level are also supported by Europol's knowledge, experience and technological facilities. Today, good international cooperation between services based on partnership is the only guarantee that we have for the effective fight against crime, because crime knows no borders. Phenomena such as terrorism, international drug trafficking, money laundering, cybercrime, human trafficking are no longer national issues. Now they have become a universal threat. We, as representatives of law enforcement agencies, need to step up our efforts and make sure that they are reflected at the international level. And that is reflected here in Europol in specific actions. Today, I'd like to draw attention to the SOCTA 2025 report. It's an excellent example of concerted efforts by member states. It's more than just a document, however. It's a morphological image of the crime profile, a barometer of the evolution and trends of crime, as well as a guide for law enforcement agencies, guiding them in their actions to fight against crime and to protect the security of the society. SOCTA is also a key tool for analysing threats from organised crime in Europe. The conclusions and recommendations of the SOCTA report are key for defining priorities for law enforcement agencies in the coming years. And that includes the upcoming Impact 2026 to 2029 cycle. A concerted fight to tackle threats is crucial, and Europe has a special coordinating, supporting and advisory role to play. As the Commander-in-Chief of the Polish Police, I would like to assure you that we are ready to cooperate closely with Europol and other European agencies. We will share knowledge, experiences and resources to jointly develop effective strategies and plans to allow us to respond to the increasing dynamics of criminal threats. We should not forget, however, that the most common crime phenomenon in the EU is drug crime. More than half of all European crime networks are involved in drug crime. The European drug market is characterized by a wide availability of high potency and high purity substances. The market is constantly changing due to chemical innovation and a new range of psychoactive agents, but also in terms of the modus operandi of criminals and the distribution methods. One particular area of concerns is the production and sale of synthetic drugs. The challenge here remains the fragmented legislation in the EU member states, which have different approach to the use of individual substances. What's more, drug production is leading to a dangerous marriage of the criminal world and the legitimate business sector. And these legitimate structures have been infiltrated. The Polish police and as well as police authorities in many other countries have excellent and dedicated officers whose work has led to significant successes in the fight against drug crime. In August 2024, we managed to dismantle several opioid and catinoid production sites in Poland and in Ukraine. Among them was the largest ever synthetic opioid laboratory in Poland, which produced crystal meth. In addition, we dismantled 8 laboratories producing synthetic catinoids. There were several arrests of high-profile members of criminal networks. Last year, thanks to the work of the Polish police, nearly 38 tons of drugs were seized, of which almost 8 tons were seized by officers from other countries, thanks to the information that they got from Polish police officers. In addition, on the basis of information from Polish police officers, 17 illegal drug laboratories were dismantled. Ladies and gentlemen, in March, and indeed in January and February, we confiscated tons of drugs. And as the head of the Polish police, I have to as well refer to the war that is raging in Ukraine on the eastern border of my country. This is a threat for the EU member states, and we need to bear this in mind. Of course, we should bear in mind that the cessation of military operations will not necessarily mean the end of threats to general security. In this context, we should also think of the increase in the black market in weapons and ammunition and attempts by Russian criminal-speaking groups to exert influence. And there has been sabotage acts on a day-to-day basis, and we need to tackle this together. And together with our internal security forces. Ladies and gentlemen, after the end of the war in Ukraine, we should be clear what this means, particularly today, because these activities by organised crime are growing. They are on the increase, and that's a fact. Just like we saw at the end of the Balkan War, that was also the case. It led to a rise in crime. And as the head of the police and law enforcement agencies in the EU, we need to take this very seriously. We need to make sure that we are best prepared for these threats so that we can tackle them in the best possible way. And we need to prepare for this post-war period. It is approaching. However, we don't know when it will actually arrive. Migration is also an issue in Poland. There have been direct contacts between people who have fought on the front line. And of course, soldiers are fighting on the front line, and they are well aware of of how to handle weapons. The SOCTA report will lay the foundation for the direction of EU law enforcement agencies in the coming years, tackling drug crime, weapons trafficking, and uncontrolled migrant smuggling are priorities for law enforcement agencies. That applies to my services, but also for the respective units in Europol. Synthetic drugs are on the rise in Europe, but also in light of what's going on the front line. Illegal weapon trafficking, migration, smuggling, these are all serious crimes, and they are all related to what is going on the border between Poland and Belarus. And we've experienced this in recent times, but we can expect more to come. Therefore, our close cooperation in coming years will be of key importance for the security of the EU. It is a common challenge that we face to make sure that our citizens remain safe and secure. So thank you for your commitment and your readiness to work together. I trust that our concerted efforts will bring real results. Together we can achieve more in terms of the security of Europe.
Dziękuję. Thank you very much. Commander-in-Chief of the Polish Police, Marek Boron, speaking today here on behalf of the Polish Presidency of the Council of the European Union. We can now have our Q&A session. We will take questions from journalists in the room and from people attending the live stream. But to give those journalists who made the trip, I already see arms up, to give those journalists who made the trip to The Hague a benefit, I would like to start. And you've been the first. If you would say your name and also the media outfit you're working, a microphone will be delivered. Here, to rise in front, Ina, of you. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Laura Dubois for the Financial Times. I have a question for Catherine de Bolle, please. I was wondering if you could give examples of these AI-powered attacks that you mentioned that have been backed by state actors or carried out on behalf of these state actors. And I was also wondering if you could tell us which states, I think Russia has been mentioned, are of particular concern to you when it comes to cooperating with organized crime. Thank you.
Thank you for your question and welcome to the headquarters of Europol. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. Important messages for internal security. AI-powered attacks can be linked, of course, in a lot of cases to cybercrime attacks against critical infrastructures. To make sure that, for instance, there are difficulties to have enough energy in attacked states, like we saw in Ukraine, cyber attacks from the Russians against critical infrastructure that then did put people without electricity for weeks. That are, for instance, attacks that are done and that also can be done by AI technology. What we also see in the usage of AI is that the messages that are spread, for instance, when we talk about multiplication of child sexual abuse material, there you see that a lot of synthetic data is created and is then multiplied and then sent to a lot of people or perpetrators. And the problem today is that you do not see all the time anymore, is the content created by a human or is the content created by a machine, by AI. So there we still have difficulties to make sure that we are going behind the right perpetrators.
You had a second question as well, Laura, right? Yes. 1 second, microphone is on its way.
Thank you. If you could just say what kind of state actors, aside from Russia, are of particular concern to you. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Poland, state actors besides Russia?
Yes, sure. So let me also give you one example, this from the last days. It was the huge cyber attack with using also the AI technology against one of the Polish hospital. That's why it was very serious, because it was the unfortunately this hospital had to stop its activity for the hours, because it was real serious cyber attack, but absolutely with using the artificial intelligence technology. And let me give also the example, this activity of Russia and Belarus creating this artificial created migration route via African countries to Belarus, Poland, and via into the European Union countries. This, as you can imagine, this is impossible to creating this migration route without engagement of the authorities from these countries. Because, for example, this is quite very advanced modus operandi, because this is the migrants who cross the Polish-Belarusian border. Mostly they have the Russian visa, student visa, working visa, and they are transferred from, for example, Moscow to Minsk. and then by the buses to the Polish-Belarusian border, and also the border guards, Belarusian border guards, show them where it's possible to cross the border. That's why it is really very advanced from the logistic point of view. This is very advanced migration route, and as I said, it is impossible to do it without the engagement of the not only local authorities, but also the governments. And last but not least, we have to also to take into account is also the money source for different also criminal activities, not only by the criminal gangs, but also the authorities, because this is the grace fair of the activities. That's why we can absolutely show this connection between the function of criminal gangs and the authorities of Belarus and Russia concerning this artificially created migration route. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I just can add, we do not have hybrid threats in our mandate now. We are looking for criminal offenses. So when we look at an attack, we look at it from a criminal perspective. But when we see that a state could be involved in this attack, then we refer the investigation back to the countries.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is important to explain. A hybrid threat, there's always a crime behind the hybrid threat. Maybe law enforcement starts investigating the crime. At some point they find out that there might be a state actor behind. Currently, investigating hybrid threats is not in the mandate of Europol. Also, there are some state actors mentioned in the report. Of course, this is not a closed group, but that can be changed. There was another journalist, the gentleman with the white shirt. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks very much. Richard Carter from the AFP News Agency. I also had some questions about AI, if I may, to Executive Director de Bolle. The report says the emergence of fully autonomous AI could pave the way for entirely AI-controlled criminal networks, marking a new era in organized crime. Could you explain how an AI-controlled criminal network might work? That seems very interesting to me. And a second question, if I may. At your presentation, you said we must ensure that law enforcement stays ahead. Given how fast technologies are developing, such as quantum computing, etc., how confident are you that the good guys can stay ahead? And can you give us some concrete examples of initiatives you're taking to make sure this is the case? Thank you very much.
So I really believe that at law enforcement, we have the possibility to stay ahead, maybe sometimes. It's very important that we invest in technological development, that we recruit the right people with technological skills, and that we have the legal possibilities to have access to the data we need to launch our investigations and to have a good view on the communication. So as law enforcement and in Europol, we did set up our innovation lab because a few years ago it was a huge demand from the law enforcement community already to have a good overview what is going on within the European Union and worldwide. What are the technological developments? We look at them and we assess what is in for criminals and what is in for the law enforcement community. Now, thanks to the update on our legal framework in 2022, we can develop technological tools in a completely closed environment to see with these tools, can we address the difficulties we see in the usage of technology and to use, in fact, technology from our side to tackle crime with criminal networks. So the investments in the resources and the legal framework are very important for the future for law enforcement to be able to continue. Also, the fact that nowadays we are still working with different criminal codes in the whole of the European Union, where the territory is very important to define who will manage the operation and who will manage the investigation, we will need to find new solutions in policing because the cyber world is a global world. The digital environment is globally organized. So we also have to have protocols there so that we are also for the future strong enough to tackle these global crime areas. We are reflecting on that, and I know that the police chiefs in the European Union are reflecting on that, and that will will be also discussed with the future of Europol, because it will not be only about the future of Europol and making Europol a fully operational agency. We have to see that the whole of the EU internal security architecture is aligned, and that we can maintain the rule of law and the security, the internal security at an acceptable level for our citizens. When we talk about AI and the usage of AI, as I mentioned, for us it's nowadays very difficult to see, is it a human or an AI tool that is behind some developments. When we look at online frauds, for instance, that is a real epidemic. It's at an epidemic scale at the moment, and it is because that is AI generated material. So you have people that are exploited going to a kind of firms in countries out of the European Union with their targets they have to reach on a daily basis to spread, for instance, romantic messages to a lot of people and to get money from the victims they approach. Before, when you had on a daily basis 10 of those kind of messages, now you have hundreds of those kind of messages, because everything is multiplicated thanks to AI. At one moment in time, you could have a person who is thinking of a business he would like to set up in the underground world. You can buy almost everything online in the dark web. You can also have the dark GPT at the moment to help you to set up a criminal business. So these are methods that one single person, in fact, can reach a lot of people to defraud people, to steal data, and then to steal data now already to decrypt the data in another moment in time. The AI development is a very fast development. A lot of I am not a specialist in technology, but a lot of my specialists tell me that they don't know where it's going to end. So the pace is very fast, and for us to understand everything that is possible is not easy. That's why we need to contact and to stay in contact with the private sector. This is very important to understand, but also to find methods and technology to stop them at one moment in time and to stop the developments. But as I said, everything can be developed, but the society has to decide what are the ethical standards and what are the legal standards that are acceptable in our society. That's why I say that the legal framework to govern the digital environment will be very important, and also to see which competencies do you allow justice and police forces to use.
Thank you much for your reply. So mostly online scams, Roman scams, dark Gen AI tools, using AI. With soon 6 billion people online, you have 6 billion potential victims for AI-driven online scams. There was a question, I think, the gentleman in grey.
Yes, Sergio Cantone from Euronews. I have a question for the director, the executive director of Europol, and the European Commissioner, and also the Polish presidency. So the three of you. Is there any evidence of permeability between the organized crime and the sanction avoidance, the sanctions against Russia, for instance, in the war? According to some press reports, the prosecutor office, anti-mafia prosecutor office in Italy, for instance, is investigating the activity of oil tankers, this fleet, this phantom fleet. Have you any evidence or any element concerning this sanction avoidance? And if I may have a second question, could you quantify the budget that you are ready to pledge for increasing the activity of Europol and the impact funds? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Who would like to start of the speakers?
I can only say that we have cases that tend to confirm that, but we can, of course, these are ongoing cases, and we cannot extend more on that. But there are cases that then tend to confirm that, yes.
Maybe about the sanctions, I think so it is very huge success of Polish presidency to extend the sanction against the more than 2,000 Russians. Unfortunately, after the request of Hungary, we have to delete from this list 4 names. But one of these names is absolutely crucial for us because it is the real security threat for Poland. That's why the Minister Siemoniak, the Minister of Internal Affairs, decided to include this name on our national list of sanctions. It is I've seen the compromise between how to find the solution, how to find the compromise between the different positions of the countries. And this is our new reality. We have to find because it is not majority voting. That's why it is difficult to reach the consensus. But fortunately, we as the presidency, we did our best to extend the sanctions for more than 2,000 Russians, and we reached it. Even if for us it was a little bit difficult to accept, but of course, finding the compromise is more important than in our national interests, I can say. But we find a solution concerning the sanction. Maybe it is a little bit broader response when you ask it, but I think it was absolutely necessary.
Maybe about the money. Yes, I mean, as we said before, it needs more resources, of course. And as you know, we are discussing the new MFF, and that, of course, plays an important role that as well. We were talking about doubling the personnel, doubling the staff of Europol. So you'll see it needs a lot more money, but we're discussing that with the competent commission, of course, at the moment when it comes to the MFF.
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up especially for the one who is representing the fact the council here, that is a Polish presidency. Again, the follow-up question is on sanction avoidance. I'm just asking whether there are some evidences of, say, organized crime or organized criminal organization that are helping the state actors to avoid the sanctions.
Sorry, it is not part of my responsibility in the ministry. I can't answer the question, but I think so. It is absolutely true, but I can't give you the proper example for that. So for the case.
Thank you.
I can just tell you that we see that sanction evasion schemes are the same as money laundering schemes used by criminals. So there must be a correlation.
All right. Is there another question in the room? Doesn't look like, because we have a lot of questions online. I would start with 3 questions from Lisa O'Carroll, correspondent in Brussels for the UK daily newspaper The Guardian. So, regarding Russia, the speakers talked about a shadow alliance between hybrid threat actors and criminals. Can you explain this alliance between threat actors, countries, and organized crime networks?
You know, this is I think so. I have already explained this modus operandi, but I can repeat, of course, because this is you have to imagine that this type of this modus operandi, because at the Polish-Belarusian border we have mainly the people from such countries like the Yemen, Somalia, Ethiopia, Iraq, Egypt, and of course this is not natural migration route for them. And of course, all of them, not all, but many of them have the Russian visas. It means that they are recruited in such countries, and that the different Russian sponsored tour operators organize the travel from different African countries into the to the airport in Moscow, and then they spent a few days in Moscow. Then after that, they are transferred to Minsk as the capital city of Belarus, and then after spending few days in Minsk, they are transferred to Grodno. It is the huge city which is very close to the Polish-Belarusian border, and then they are transferred exactly to the fence, the border, and we can observe this because we have quite advanced the monitoring system, also using with drones, but also the cameras, and we will see these people, for example, the Belarusian border guards who instruct the migrants how and when it's possible to cross the border. That's why it is real cooperation between the different state actors, not only the authorities, but also for example, the border guards, police, and so on, so on. This is, as I said, very, very well advanced, well advanced migration route. That's why it is. I can imagine, for example, in the case of Syria now, for example, that the state actors are not included in this creating migration route. But believe me, that in the case of Belarus and Russia, it is impossible. That's why, for example, we had also the discussion about the different legal tools which will be used by us in the very near future, about the possibility of Belarusians. Politicians who might ask for the internal protection, the Polish-Belarusian border. But it is impossible, because this is also the Belarusian fence, and no one without allowedness of Belarusian state actors will not go to the Polish-Belarusian border. That's why it is quite obvious this is the quite clear connection between the different state actors, authorities, but also with the criminal gangs. But at the end of the day, the migration route is organized by the criminal gangs from Saudi Arabia, from also this base in Turkey and different countries. Because we see, for example, different chats between these organizers of this migration route, criminal gangs, namely, but also the migrants who are foreigners who are interested in to use this migration route, trying to reach the different European countries.
Thank you very much. There's also a big chapter in the SOCTA on the win-win situation between state actors and organized crime networks. State actors can carry out destabilization activities in countries without having them being traced back to a country, and the organized crime network, they get often know-how, tech, and also money. And yes, please, go ahead.
You said it completely rightly, and there is, of course, a connection. We are seeing criminal networks that work on behalf of, as I said before, on behalf of foreign powers, also of foreign governments that, as you said, that hire migrant smugglers to, as we said, to weaponize migration against us, especially on the Polish border, of course. Yeah.
Maybe one example, because I think so. Remind me one very good examples. Every day we publish the numbers of attempts of illegal border crossings on the Polish-Belarusian border, and we counted quite well. And then it was a very, I think so, very important situation, very visible situation, just after the elections nomination of Lukashenko in Belarus. It was the flat. It was the no attempts. One day after his nomination, it was the 80 attempts. And now it's more than 150, 170 every day. That's why it was I think so quite visible. Before the nomination elections, no one. Just after the nomination elections, the numbers of attempts increased about the hundreds of %. Thank you.
A very quick follow-up question for Poland from The Guardian. The attack on the hospital, you consider this to be a state actor, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Then there are a lot of questions on violence, so maybe we can, because we are a bit running out of time, move a little bit from state actors and hybrid threats to violence. There are a lot of questions about violence spreading from those parts of Europe that had been hotspots of violence in the past, and that is spreading a little bit more across Europe. And maybe for Director de Bolle, if you could elaborate on the link between violence, organized crime networks, and why we see violence spreading.
So what we see in the European Union is that the violence is, we see more and more violence. We see also more and more violence used by young people recruited on behalf of criminal networks and criminal organizations. When I, for instance, refer to cocaine, cocaine is coming into the European Union, not only via the big ports anymore, but a bit from everywhere, and also in the smaller ports. So you see a spread of violence also in other ports areas and in other areas in the European Union. There are countries who are confronted with more violence. That are the countries, in fact, where the criminals, they don't care if they are in the loop of police or not. And then there are also countries where you have a bit less violence, and that is because criminals want to stay under the loop. But violence is becoming, and is already a few years, a key feature for criminal networks to use, to intimidate, to make sure that they keep the territory they are responsible of. And we also see that the use of violence done by young people is really increasing. There are recruitment campaigns, for instance, set up by criminal networks where they offer 19,000 to 20,000 euros to a minor to engage in violence or in a contract killing nowadays in the European Union.
Thank you very much. There are a lot of questions on the MPEG priorities. So no, the MPEG priorities are not decided with this report. This report makes such suggestions based on data and intelligence from the member states. The MPEG priorities will be decided by the Council, by the member states, by summer. So all the questions, if this crime area is still an MPEG priority or not, you have to wait for the summer. Then there's maybe a question for the Commissioner. Considering all this increase of organized crime in the year of the 40th anniversary of Schengen, do you consider that maybe the free movement of people should be reduced within the Schengen zone to combat organized crime? I hope not.
What an interesting question. Of course not. Schengen is one of the biggest achievements of the European Union, next to the euro and next to the internal market altogether. So I think we have to do everything to protect, of course, the external borders of the Schengen area and of the European Union. Yes, that's true. But to make it possible then to have the free movement still within the Schengen area. Schengen is important for us. It's important for Europe and for all the member states of the Schengen area. So let's do everything to protect our outside borders, our external borders, and to tackle, of course, illegal migration on the borders, and also to tackle the criminal networks. But let's do everything to make Schengen even better. And we are doing a very good job, actually, because just recently 2 member states of the European Union have joined Schengen, Romania and Bulgaria, and they did a very good work on their outside borders also to get prepared for Schengen. So let's tackle that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for ensuring we can still travel. There's a follow-up question for you on the internal security strategy. How will the SOCTA report give input for the security strategy, and will the security strategy you are going to propose take into account the cooperation between criminal networks and state actors?
Yes, of course. I mean, the SOCTA report is incredibly important for the internal security strategy. That is one of the key elements, of course, and we are very thankful also to the SOCTA. Especially this year's edition, I think, is so timely. What a coincidence that we're just going to present the internal security strategy in the next weeks. Whether it will be March or April, we'll see, but at least in the next week. So I think this SOCTA report comes at the exact right moment, I would say, for Europe altogether. And the response to the forthcoming new internal security strategy, I think will provide, and that's the basis is SOCTA, of course, will provide a significantly more integrated look also at the challenges we're facing together and how to address them also. And yes, to answer in a very concrete way, this is the basis for our internal security strategy.
Thank you very much. Maybe two last questions. There's a question on multilateral cooperation, maybe for Executive Director de Bolle. More or less, which multilateral cooperation with geographical areas, regions of this planet, organizations, countries, should Europol carry out in order to focus on tackling the crime areas and the DNA and the evolving threat as put out in the SOCTA report?
Thank you. For us, the cooperation, for instance, with Latin America is extremely important. We are very grateful to the Commission that you take so many initiatives to have agreements in place with Latin American countries, because the information sharing with them is very important when we talk about drugs. And drugs are still a key issue in the European Union. We had the most threatening criminal networks report a year ago, and 40% of the networks are engaged in drugs. Cocaine is still very important for the European Union. So to work together with them, to have a good view on the organized crime groups over there, to know where they are transporting the drugs, which routes they use, is extremely important. Of course, other regions are also important. When we talk about migration, we need to have a closer cooperation with Africa. That is clear, and we are not so strong in the cooperation with that part of the world. And of course, also Asian countries are extremely important when we talk about money laundering, counterfeited goods, etc. So the exercise we always make is that together with the member states, we discuss which countries and which regions pose a risk to the internal security in the EU. And then we discuss with the European institutions, and European Commission takes then the lead in negotiations with the countries or the continents that are most important for the internal security related to the EU. And that is an ongoing exercise where every partner takes up its responsibility.
And just one example, because you mentioned that before, that when we talk about the drugs trafficking and then the ports, because you mentioned that, and we saw that the Ports Alliance we have showed a lot of success actually, because the drugs traffickers were moving from the bigger ports to the smaller ones. So that was the first success, and now of course we have to tackle the smaller ones as well, and that's what we're doing with the port strategy, also, which was mentioned before. So yeah, being flexible and keeping up with the criminals and closing the gap to the criminals. They will always be ahead of us, of course, a little bit, but closing the gap is so important on a technological basis, on an innovation basis, as you're doing with the Innovation Lab. So keeping up, I think, is important.
Thank you much, Commissioner Brunner, closing the gap. And we made it to 2:30 at the end of the press conference. Thank you very much for your attention. I was given to understand the Commissioner has probably a little bit of time for an interview or not, but there are people traveling with him who know. For the Polish representatives and Executive Director de Bolle, we have a press room ready in case the journalists would like to have bilateral interviews. Again, the report is online, the press release is online. Thank you very much, and looking forward to the selection of the MPEC priorities by the Council. Thank you, have a good afternoon.